Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a psychological landscape that is deeply hidden, yet honestly, incredibly common. We're looking at the architecture of isolation. Specifically, we're exploring the unseen world of chronically overworked, lonely individuals who seem entirely incapable of asking for help. If you've ever wondered why some of the strongest people you know suddenly shut down when they're hurting the most, or hey, maybe you even recognize that tendency in yourself, this explainer is going to shed a ton of light on exactly why that happens. So let's unpack the hidden psychology behind this invisible wall.
Let's set the scene with a scenario you might actually recognize. Picture someone who is violently ill, or maybe they're struggling on crutches in the pouring rain. A kind stranger walks by and offers them an umbrella. And what do? They flash this bright smile, wave their hand, and say, "Oh no, thank you, I'm perfectly fine." Have you ever done something like this? Refused help when you clearly, desperately needed it? Well, let's dive into this, because this isn't just about being overly polite. It's actually the symptom of a deeply rooted psychological structure built up over decades.
Section 1. The reflexive "I'm fine."
To really get why this reflex happens, think about the stark contrast in how this person operates. In everyday life, they are sociable, cheerful, totally approachable. But during a crisis, it's a completely different story. Instead of leaning on their social bonds, they go straight into emergency isolation. They're thinking, "I don't want to be a burden," or "I don't want to worry you," or even, "I don't want you to dislike me." That deep, almost exaggerated care for the other person's comfort manifests as this thick, invisible wall to protect their relationships from their own burdens. They're essentially living a hidden double life, where everyday brightness almost acts like camouflage, and emergency isolation is just their default protocol.
Section 2. The relying equals losing psychology.
So why is this instinct to hide just so incredibly powerful? Well, it all comes down to a core internal conflict. For people who have basically built their entire identity, their status at work, their role in the family, their fundamental self-worth on the concept of trying hard, asking for help is genuinely terrifying. To them, relying on others means surrendering the very thing that gives them value. If they stop trying, if they admit they're powerless to fix a situation on their own, they feel an absolute, paralyzing loss of value. I mean, they logically know that asking for help when you're sick is a totally normal human thing to do, but their body and their conditioned mind simply will not allow them to do it.
Now, what's really interesting here is the domino effect that triggers in their brain the absolute second they're offered help, like that umbrella in the rain. It creates an overwhelming, instantaneous mental load. First, if they receive a favor, they absolutely must show adequate gratitude. If they show gratitude, the power dynamic of the relationship changes. And if the relationship changes, they now carry this heavy obligation to pay that favor back. This entire chain of anxiety flashes through their mind in a split second, and the easiest, safest way to stop that anxiety is to just smile and say, "I'm fine."
Section 3. A safe zone named despair.
Okay, this brings us to a place that sounds incredibly dark, but we really have to validate this struggle without any judgment. We usually think of despair as just profound sadness or hopelessness, right? But based on the source material we're looking at, for the chronically isolated hard worker, despair is actually a psychological safety zone. When someone has repeatedly held on to hope, only to be let down, betrayed, or just utterly exhausted by the effort, they eventually learn to drop hope entirely. If you never expect warmth, and if you never dream of an exit, you can never, ever be hurt by disappointment again.
Just let this sink in for a second. If you don't know warmth, the cold feels normal. Staying in this dark, isolated, emotional room isn't a sign of laziness. It isn't a lack of willpower. It's because the capacity to imagine a positive outcome literally hasn't been nurtured. If someone has lived their entire life adapting to the freezing cold, suddenly being placed in a warm room feels abnormal, terrifying, and straight up dangerous. They stay in the cold because, well, it's predictable.
Section 4. Opening only to the divine.
Which leads us to this really fascinating paradox. If these folks are utterly terrified of relying on others, where does all that unspoken pain go? Why is it that those who are the most isolated often turn most deeply to ancient texts, philosophy, or the divine? Well, think about the difference here. Human relationships are fraught with risk, right? People can betray you, they demand gratitude, and they constantly shift power dynamics. But the divine, whether you view that as a god, the universe, or ancient wisdom, is completely different. It's silent. It demands absolutely nothing in return. It offers an unconditional presence. And that brilliantly illustrates why it is a perfectly safe connection for someone who is terrified of the transactional nature of human help.
Our source material highlights a quote that captures this beautifully, and honestly, quite painfully.
Those who pretend not to know loneliness pray to God at the bottom of it. Just think about that for a moment. This acknowledges a profound, universal suffering. The people who smile the brightest during the day, pretending they don't need anyone, are the exact same people praying for relief in the darkest hours of the night. This is a coping mechanism that human beings have literally carried across thousands of years.
Engaging with the divine or with ancient philosophy does something almost magical for the isolated worker. It gives them formal permission to feel lonely, because these ancient words were born from universal human suffering. Reading them basically tells these exhausted individuals, it is okay that you are hurting, your pain is real and it is valid. It gives them the long overdue permission to finally acknowledge their own reality, without having to explain it to a human being who might judge them.
Section 5. Practicing receiving little by little. So how exactly does someone step out of the cold? We have to pivot gently toward the light. Because, a door that's been bolted shut for decades can absolutely be opened, but it has to be opened very, very slowly. Going back to our metaphor of the dark room, you often don't even realize you're sitting in the pitch black until a light finally shines in. Healing rarely starts with some massive dramatic intervention. It starts quietly. It happens when a genuinely warm word from a colleague or a random passage in a book unexpectedly illuminates their reality, making them realize for the very first time, wow, I have been carrying this incredibly heavy burden entirely on my own for a very long time.
So the crucial point to take away here is that healing isn't some overnight transformation. It's built entirely on safe, highly actionable micro-practices of receiving kindness. Let's walk through these steps. Step 1, when someone asks how you are, your reflex will still be, I'm fine. And that is okay. Just try to add, but I'm a bit tired right after it. Just a little honesty. Step 2, if someone offers you that umbrella and you still feel the overwhelming need to refuse it, just make sure you say thank you out loud. You don't have to take the umbrella yet. You just have to practice acknowledging the warmth.
You basically increase your capacity for connection simply by increasing the number of times you practice receiving. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a gentle challenge, shifting you from just a listener to an active participant in your own life. Think about your day ahead. What small thing, a compliment, someone holding the door, a minor piece of advice, might you be able to simply receive tomorrow without rushing to pay it back? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating hidden architecture with me. I really hope it brings a little more light into your understanding of yourself and the hard workers around you.